Hi, everyone. I'm Renee Frankel. I'm the Managing Director of the Center for Public Interest, Advocacy, and Collaboration, and I'm really excited to welcome our panel today. Our moderator is maybe familiar to some of you, Professor Sharmila Murthy. So Sharmila will get us started with the panelists, and welcome everyone, and thank you for being here.
Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for making time to join us today for this super important conversation, building a cross-sectoral movement when the sky is falling. Some of you may have been here for a very powerful lecture on Monday by our very esteemed Daynard Fellow, Elizabeth Yeampierre. I want to just start off before we jump into the conversation today by just talking about how important it is to create safe space for conversation and dialogue at universities. We need to be able to have difficult, challenging, important conversations away from political violence and away from threats. And with that in mind, we just want to say we are open to all of your ideas. We should have time for question and answer. We want to hear your views, your questions, even if you disagree. We welcome that as well. We just ask everyone to just speak respectfully and treat everyone else with respect. Rather than doing formal introductions, because each of these people have very polished bios, what I'd like to do is actually first invite you to tell us a little bit about yourselves and the organizations that you work with. So Elizabeth, you serve as the Executive Director of UPROSE. You're also the co-chair of the Climate Justice Alliance. Can you tell us a little bit about your work and your organization's work as a way to get us started?
Sure. Ashe, everyone. So wonderful to be here with you today again. UPROSE is Brooklyn's oldest Latino community-based organization. We work at the intersection of racial justice and climate change. And next year, the organization turns 60, which is really something worth celebrating, the fact that there is still a grassroots organization that is frontline led, that is really sort of working on the issues that are necessary today. The Climate Justice Alliance is a national organization of frontline leaders with over 100 members from Puerto Rico to Guam, Detroit, the Southwest, the Gulf South, Indian country, and working to operationalize a just transition. And we founded that organization about 11 years ago to be the center of gravity in the climate movement. And UPROSE is a member, and the Climate Justice Alliance creates a national platform that is created by the local struggle. So as opposed to a grass tops organization that determines for us what the priorities are, the priorities are determined by our members, and we move the money. We believe in building the bigger we, and we believe in fighting the bad and building the good.
I was just going to say, no, thank you so much. We're only going to be able to use one mic because apparently if you turn one on, you have to turn the other one off. Miles Gresham joins us from Neighbor to Neighbor, and there you serve as the Policy and Campaign Director. Can you tell us a little bit about your organization and your work there?
Hi, good morning, everybody. So I work at Neighbor to Neighbor, Massachusetts. We are a statewide grassroots power building organization. We have 4 chapters in Springfield, Holyoke, Worcester, and Lynn. And what we do basically boils down to advocating for legislative policy to improve the lives of directly impacted people. We are a Black and Brown-led organization. We have been for many years. So we have a C3 side that focuses on that and on training up folks to be able to advocate for themselves and to also build power towards these legislative solutions. And then we also have a C4 arm called Neighbor to Neighbor Action, where we get people from our communities elected to get these policies in place. Most recently, we got the first Afro-Latina and the first Black woman elected to the Lynn City Council, which is 60% Latino. So in a lot of cities in Massachusetts, the demographic shifts have not yet caught up to the power dynamics, and so we try to improve those.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, an actual NUSL alum. We have Sophia, you serve as the Senior Attorney and Director for Environmental Justice Legal Services at an organization often described as ACE, Alternatives for Community and Environment. Can you tell us a little bit about your work there?
Sure. Hi, y'all. So ACE is a community-based organization we were founded in 1994, so we just celebrated our 30th year. We were started by two white lawyers who went to Yale, who wanted to be doing what we now think of as traditional EJ work. So supporting the communities on the front lines of pollution from polluting infrastructure, like power plants and coal ash dumps and trash transfer stations. Over time, we transitioned to being a base building organization that is Black-led and predominantly Black-staffed. So our legal program does a variety of work. We do a little bit of direct representation of residents in environmental justice and low-income communities. We do a lot of policy work and sort of what in the just transition framework, I think of as building the new on the local, state, and national levels. We work both with Neighbor to Neighbor and Climate Justice Alliance and UPROSE in doing some of that work. But at the heart of our work is the idea that we need both legal strategies and advocacy and to build power on behalf to build power for the folks who are not the lawyers and who are not traditionally in the rooms where decisions are being made, so that we can shift that balance. And we focus on transit justice and climate justice and energy justice.
Great. So you have a really distinguished panel. As you can see, there's a big theme here, which is that this is about thinking about how to be building that cross-sectoral movement when the sky is falling, but really centering on environmental justice and on building community. But obviously, we are living in challenging times. And I'm wondering if in the wake of federal rollbacks that we're seeing on environmental justice, on civil rights, on environmental protection more broadly, what are different ways that your organization is addressing these challenges? How are you prioritizing? And maybe as part of that, how are you also keeping your spirits up at this point? So we can go in the order, and then afterwards, if you all want to respond to one another, that's all right too.
Okay, there are a lot of things that I do to keep my spirits up. I listen to Bad Bunny and watch K-drama. These are the things that give me joy. Yeah, the sky is falling, and my mom had this saying, "No tapes el cielo con la mano." Don't cover the sky with your hand. Look at it, see what it is, see what the threat is, so that you know what to do. I think that locally and nationally, what we're doing is we are changing the rules, and we're organizing base building. We're engaged in policy at a local and statewide level, and then we're involved in trans-local initiatives. Really putting a lot of effort in the red states and trying to figure out how we can get beyond the threats that exist there and supporting local communities. We are operationalizing just transition, which means putting infrastructure on the ground, making sure that there is a vine of leadership coming out of our communities that we can sustain over time. And then we're leaving some strategies to other groups. And so legal concerns and threats are often, for our organization, handled by other organizations that we work with. But at the end, we don't often think of the courts as the place to adjudicate our claims. We think that we do it in the streets, and we do that by organizing and doing popular education and really good and sophisticated comms work. It's really sort of a multi-layered approach to deal with a variety of problems, and we can't separate addressing the impact of climate change with ice raids and with other things that are threatening our community and have been for a minute. We do make a distinction between EJ and CJ. So we still do the EJ work, which is fighting the discriminatory siting of environmental burdens in our community. And then climate justice is really about looking forward and really pushing forward solutions that are going to take our people out of harm's way. And so those are very different. One really is taking care, eliminating the harm, and the other is creating a path for a just transition and building community in a hyper-local way.
What she said. Yeah, so you know, as a Black American, like the sky's been falling for like over 400 years, right? Like, whatever. But I think that there's a lot that we can take from history. I think we're fortunate to have so many blueprints in our history. So I've been looking a lot at this present situation. Sharmila, we were talking about that when we were at a conference like earlier this year. Looking at it in the lens of like post-Reconstruction, right? And what folks did then. And so I think it was Ida B. Wells said that the way to right wrongs is to shine the light of truth upon them. And so one of the things that Neighbor to Neighbor has been engaged in from the beginning of this year is responding to ICE coming into our cities and kidnapping and disappearing our people. And we've done that by creating, along with other organizations, something called the Luce Network, which is a network that basically trains people on their rights with respect to ICE and how to interact with ICE. And then we also train people to observe and report ICE sightings in order to not only to shine the light of truth upon what they're doing, but also to cut down on fear, because oftentimes, you know, we'll hear like ICE is here, ICE is there, and they're not, so to verify where ICE actually is. And so I think that part, that piece of shining the light of truth on what they are doing is a big part of what we do, and it's become a bigger part of what we do this year. I also think about like Mary McLeod Bethune, right, and building schools for African Americans in the South in the late 1800s. And so one of the things that we really have to do that we haven't done a great job of as an organization, but also just as a, whatever you want to call this, left of center grouping, we've kind of overlooked the economic needs of the people that we say that we represent, right? And so making sure that we are focusing on things like tenants' rights, right? Making sure that we are focusing on things like people's ability to pay for the places that they live in, making sure that people have economic opportunity by electing people who actually like push economic opportunity at the state and at the local level. So that's something that we've really been doing for the past few years. And then as far as you know, responding to the rollbacks in civil rights, I think it's also about, you know, again, like Elizabeth said, like base building. Like we can't do all of this work on our own. We have a staff of like, what, 16 people? We can't do all this stuff on our own. We're a statewide organization. If we don't have members who are trained, who are like able to act independently, who are able to be leaders themselves, we're done. But if we train people, if we build enough capacity, you know, that's how we win elections. That's how we get bills passed, right? It's not just us. It's people who are able to show up and advocate for their communities alongside us. And so really getting back to the base building aspect of our organization is something that we've been focused on this year. Yes, as far as like how I keep my spirits up, I don't know, I think just going for walks, spending time with family, you know, making sure that you are kind of doing the things that make freedom worth it, and making sure that you're spending time on those things and touching grass, as they say. Yeah, I think that's all I've got.
Yeah, so many things. And I will also just say that I am having a day, so if I cry, that is just what's going to happen. These are the times we live in. So I think organizationally, you know, even before the election, we were planning for the world that we're living in now, just in terms of like what is the pivot we need to make. Because as much as I hoped that we wouldn't be here, if you look at history, it was, you know, it was pretty clear where we were going. So, you know, I think doing some of the things that Elizabeth hinted at in terms of organizational defense and trying to shore things up for the organizations and communities that are on the front lines and have been the target since day one. Like the first day of the new administration, we had the executive order that rolled back EJ, and they have been consistently coming for our people ever since. And so I think for me, one of the things is just trying to stay focused on like what I can do in a day, right? Because if you look at everything, we're all just going to be laying on the floor. And so, yeah, trying to pick the one thing that I can do and having as a guiding light, you know, the vision of the world that I want to see. And I think one thing that gives me hope is like just being an abolitionist and thinking about things from a place of like, how do we get away from a world where we're depending on extractive systems in all spheres, and that the law is just one of the tools in the toolbox, as both Miles and Elizabeth have said. Like, ideally, we wouldn't need lawyers to be doing the work that we're all doing, is one thing I'll say. And then I think the other thing is just like taking the opportunity to think about like, if all of these things that we're so dependent on are under attack, and let's be honest, weren't designed in the first place for the communities that are using them most. Like for those in the environmental space, the attacks on NEPA, for example, like that's become a huge tool for EJ advocates because we don't have the civil rights tools that, we don't have enforcement and implementation of the civil rights tools that we need. So instead of just saying, how do we defend NEPA, what else do we need? We need policies that you know, require the reduction of emissions in the communities where power plants and other polluting infrastructure is located, period, full stop. And then what does that look like if we can't do it on the federal level? What does that look like here in Massachusetts? What does that look like to build with our allies in New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania, where we're working pretty deeply with folks who are part of the Climate Justice Alliance. And so, yeah, thinking about things from the place of like, what are the needs of the communities that are at the center of the crisis, and then building out our policy solutions from there. I think the other thing is, you know, I wear a variety of hats, and so trying to think about like, which hat am I wearing? Am I the lawyer representing clients right now? Am I the lawyer and one of, you know, a handful of white staff at an organization that is, you know, part of Climate Justice Alliance and other formations that are under scrutiny from the current administration. So am I thinking about, you know, protecting my organization, and then also, yeah, I guess just the like, what is, in addition to, as Miles was saying, like, what is the world building, or like, what is the bringing together of people that we need to actually shift some of these things. So I think trying to spend more time with particularly like the young people in our youth program who are just an incredible wealth of you know, energy and just joy in a time that is tough. But yeah, I guess bottom line is like not trying to do everything and knowing who I can call when I need other things, and who I can direct people to. So, and then I guess just what's keeping my spirits up. It's my family and my friend, like chosen family, friends, and you know, just being able to talk honestly about things, and then chasing my a 16-month-old nephew around and watching him look at the world and remembering that an empty closet can be a source of awe.
Really powerful themes that came out of what you all just shared. I'm struck by both the idea that we look back to history to think about what lessons can we learn that can help us navigate the past, because these are new times, but maybe they're really not so new. At the same time, in doing that, how do we do that? Doing that with community, and we're going to come to a minute about really what's the role of the lawyer in all of this. But another theme that really came out was both about holding the line at this moment, holding the line both on environmental issues, environmental justice issues, but related issues, and being responsive to the community needs, right? If it's housing, if it's the immigration raids, what is it? Like trying to be responsive while also trying to build forward. And I think your distinction about, Elizabeth, about EJ versus climate justice and the way that you're thinking about how do we build, how do we continue to build even at that moment, even in this moment, is so important. But let's come back to this question of how do we actually build community? And especially we're at a law school. We're talking to a group of future lawyers. And Elizabeth, something that you said on Monday that really struck with me is that a common refrain for many folks that want to go to law school to advance the public interest is to be a voice for the voiceless. And you push back on that idea. And I'd love to have you all perhaps reflect about, at this moment in time, what does community lawyering really look like? And if there are any practical skills you might be able to impart on the audience sitting here.
Thank you. I think I can be really annoying about how much I talk about this, but I've seen how well it works when it works well, and I've seen the damage when it doesn't. And as law students, you needed to get through a lot of other applicants to get here. You needed to get certain grades to get here, and you've been told your entire life that you are that person, right? That you're that girl. And so you believe it. You believe your own hype, right? And you've been conditioned to think that way. And then you walk into a room and there is someone sitting there who's been struggling their whole life. And they know how the system works, how it doesn't work, how it lands, not only with their family, but literally in their lungs. And they have ideas about what needs to get done. And to think for 1 second that you could be the voice for that person is the epitome of arrogance. And so humility would require that you listen and that you ask that person, what do you need and how can I serve you? Because I have a set of skills that I had the luxury and the privilege to receive, and I want to be of service. And so that is radically different than people who come in. And I've been in meetings at Uprose. I have been in meetings where I sit in the back and I listen. And people come to me and they ask me what I think, and I don't say anything because the minute that I speak, they're going to listen to what I say. Because I'm Puerto Rican, because I'm from the neighborhood, because they're proud of me, because they think I'm their lawyer, and they will defer to me. And my responsibility is to listen and then to take what they're telling me is important, a priority, reflect it back, and then make a bunch of recommendations about the path that I think we should head, and let them say, no, maybe that doesn't work. We want this. That's my responsibility, and I'm not practicing law. I run an organization, and I am a community leader. It's taken me a lifetime to own up to the fact that I am a movement builder and I am a community leader, and what that means is that there's a certain amount of impact and influence that comes from the voice that I give things, and I need to travel and carry the voice of the people in my community with me. They're never going to be at the tables that I have the privilege to be at, and so I have to bring them with me. Where it doesn't work is when lawyers gather and they're in their cubicles and they look across each other and like, oh my God, that's a great idea, and they start creating things, and then they go looking and shopping for clients. That doesn't work. It doesn't work when the lawyer speaks to the client in a way that is diminishing and makes the client feel like they're not so smart because they're not understanding their technical lingo. They're exclusionary technical lingo that can be said in basic English, right? But it's a way that they keep feeling really puffed up about themselves, right? And so it's going to require an internal audit, an assessment of your values, of your core values, and who you want to be as an attorney. How you're going to be using those skills to either advance and support the folks that didn't have the privilege to walk the path that you've had. It is a blessing to be able to be a Thurgood Marshall or to be an attorney that gets to serve people who are trusting you, giving you their love. I'll give you one example. When I was very young, and I remember I was representing the elderly, and every time I would come in, particularly the Black and Latino elderly, their families would be there. They would be feeding me. They would be introducing me to their sons. All of that was happening, and anything that I said had a lot of weight. And I was like, okay, I need to check myself because they're giving me the power, and they hold the power. So that's what I would share as an attorney.
I think yeah, having a dose of humility is like important for all of us. Not just lawyers, right? This whole like academic leftist sort of clique that kind of like pretends that we know everything, and we promulgate all these theories and all these phrases, and we're losing, right? Like the losing should humble us, right? So I think humility is important. In my role, I'm fortunate in that I don't have to go to court in my role anymore. I get to advise members. I get to build systems with folks. And then, you know, the campaigns that I direct are campaigns that are chosen by our members. So I am just like carrying out their wishes. And so I kind of have it easy, I guess, in that regard. But yeah, I think making sure that you can like use your skills and your voice as a lawyer to advise other people and like bring other people into their power, and not just make it all about like you and making sure that you're passing the mic. I think that's really important. I also, I'm just to give an example, right? Because I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, and so go Bills, and so when I was in 2020, when George Floyd and Breonna Taylor were murdered, I was a public defender, and I was also, you know, doing the work that I do now. I've been doing this kind of work at Neighbor to Neighbor. I've been doing this kind of work like for free for like 10, 15 years, right? And so I was organizing with a group called Free the People Western New York, which is focused on ending mass incarceration and you know, getting rights for people who are incarcerated. And so we started to organize, right, around policing issues in Buffalo. And what I noticed was, you know, because I had Esquire next to my name, and because, you know, people knew who my mom was, and so like, you know, these people, these folks in government would come to me and ask me what my people thought, what my community thought, and try to get me to do some like goofy crap, right, that like my community wouldn't like endorse. And I was like, no, I'm not going for that. And so there was one meeting where they just wanted me to come, and it was like a bunch of, you know, local elected officials, the mayor, county executive, those kind of, you know, people. And I said, nope, I'm bringing my people. I said, I'm bringing the organizers from Free the People. I'm bringing organizers from PUSH. I'm bringing organizers from all these like community organizations that I work with, right? I'm bringing organizers who, some of whom were my former clients, right? And we all showed up, right? And the looks on those people's faces were like horrified, but they couldn't do anything, right? Because I'm there, my people were there, right? And so they had to negotiate with us, right? And the last thing I'll say is, the stuff that we got accomplished because like we were together. There were constantly like efforts to separate us, to divide us, and so we have to like stay together. And none of that would have moved if I hadn't like got with my people. If it was just me, if it was, you know, it wouldn't have. But I'll also say, last thing, don't sleep on lawyers though, because in 2020. What I saw in Buffalo was when we started to do the work that we did around policing, around trying to get police out of schools to break the school to prison pipeline in Buffalo public schools, to create laws to make sure that police were documenting the stops that they were making and documenting the racial demographics, which we did in support of like a constitutional lawsuit. Lawyers came out of the woodwork to support us. Like, I still get emotional thinking about how many personal injury lawyers, like high muckety muck, like fancy lawyers who you wouldn't think would be involved. They came out. Sometimes they didn't come out publicly. Sometimes they had to come out, privately because, they were working for the other side. But, lawyers can change a lot of things. That's how we got this country. And so, don't sleep on lawyers, but also don't believe your own hype. You know what I mean? Like, make sure you're with your people when you're doing the work.
So much yes to all of that. While they were talking, I pulled out my bar card because y'all may not know this yet because you're not barred, but it literally is a piece of paper that you sign and then it self-laminates. And like the amount of power that we have in this little card and the access that it gives us is wild. And it's just a self-laminated piece of paper. And I think remembering that is really important. And I know in other states it's actually fancier than it is in Massachusetts, but that is what it is. So yeah, I think remembering just the power that your degree confers on you, and both from the communities that you may be working with and the clients that you may represent, but also from other people. And having the ability to say, I don't know the answer to that, I'll get back to you, is really, really important. And one of my mentors at one point, when I was trying to figure out, because after law school, I was a public defender, and that was during the first wave of police killings in 2014 and 15. And I decided I couldn't do that work anymore because it was just like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound, and I wanted to be doing something that actually was, building the world we need and not just doing triage. And it was another lawyer who has a lot of experience who said to me, like, the day you feel like you know all the answers is the day you quit. So I think being honest with people about that is really important. I think community learning is one of those concepts also that now has become kind of a buzzword. And so I think it is really important to talk about what we all think it means and what it can look like, because it can look different depending on your organization and your identity and the type of work that you're doing. So I think having conversations with folks is really important about, like, what does this actually mean? Can't emphasize enough just listening, clarifying what I think people are saying when they're answering questions for me, and then the piece around language justice that Elizabeth mentioned. It's not just using, there's the technical terms and the jargon that we use in the legal field, and then there's all of the bureaucratic and administrative technical stuff. There's all of the science technical stuff. A lot of the time when I'm reading, permits, for example, my head starts spinning because I can't follow a lot of the science that's in there. If you look at a solid waste permit or a water permit, you need someone to decode it for you. And I have 3 advanced degrees. So I think also being realistic about that, and reminding the people that are issuing those permits of that is a big part of how I spend my time. So it's not just our words, but it's the words of people in government and the other decision makers, and helping to shift how those things are being described and communicated to people, so that community members can know what does it mean, what is, like, there's a trash transfer station in Roxbury. What are the actual things that they have to do to keep their permit, and who do I call if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing? And I think that, just the other thing is about this is, I think it is possible to do lawyering that is accountable to community in government and in other, in all of the other spaces. You don't have to be doing it at a nonprofit. You just have to be doing it in ways that is accountable to the needs of the people who you are there to serve. And that can be tricky if you're in private practice, but I would just encourage folks who are thinking about doing things that aren't necessarily sort of the typical public interest work to think about the ways that you can shift things internally at organizations where you are, because the big greens need it. Some of the larger, more mainstream organizations need it too, like the number of hours that I know Elizabeth and others spent along with me in conversations with folks about policies that we had serious concerns on was, I think we're owed reparations for that time. And so, yeah. We did. We sure did. But yeah, I mean, I could go on about that, but I guess just thinking about, how you are using your power and like what you're thinking about things from a values place, and not just, am I getting the best outcome for this client, but like, what does this actually mean for the power dynamics in the world wherever you are?
This is great. And actually, for you as law students, actually some really important lessons for life. So first, I want to just point out a couple things that came out of some of the comments that maybe wasn't so obvious. Number one, people's career paths are not linear. So you actually heard people doing different things. And Elizabeth has this really lovely profile on Northeastern's website that talks a little bit about her own path. So that's sort of one thing I want to point out. Two, the role, in law school, you often feel like your role is to speak up and to be the smart person in the room. And we actually heard the importance of learning when to step back and when to sit back and when to listen. And then also what you're hearing coursing through this is also just the role of navigating dynamics, organizational dynamics, people dynamics, power dynamics, and really thinking about some of those softer skills that are also incredibly important. And I want to just actually offer one more addition to what your last comment about folks that may be going into private practice and has nothing to do with community lawyering, but one way that you can spend your time and sort of serve your goals is also thinking about serving on the boards of nonprofit groups. You are actually very well equipped to do that and to support organizations in that way in your own time. We are going to go to audience questions soon, but I want to do one more round of questions. We're going to try to end this a little bit early at 12:55, and we want to make sure we have ample time for discussion with you all. So if you have questions, feel free to keep those in mind, and we'll take your questions. But I think what I want to do is, since we've talked a little bit about how to be a community lawyering, a little bit about skills, I want to actually just go back to the sort of thinking about when the sky is falling. And we've talked about the federal government, but what are ways that states, governments, local governments, or even at the community level you are doing to try and fill the void?
So before I answer this question, I just want to say that, and because you were speaking and your voice was so important on this panel, I have 5 brothers, a husband, and a son, and I'm a womanist. You have to admit black men. You will have to admit black men to Northeastern. You will not have a full education, and your education will be incomplete, and putting pressure on the small number of black and brown, black and Latino students in the class to be all things so that you walk out with a full education is abusive. So there is a responsibility that white students have to take on the things that your ancestors brought forth and allow our students, our black and Latino students, to be able to breathe, because while they're here, their communities are being overwhelmed by ICE. Their families are in harm's way, and they still have to get good grades like you do. So please hold that in your hearts and understand your responsibility is not to speak for or to expect them to be everything for you so that you get that education. And I have to leave early, so I needed to say that and get that off my chest because it is just unkind. And admit black men. All right, so to answer your question, So what we did was we created this system called co-governance. We know that everything is going to be disrupted, including governance. And you know that saying that not all skin folk are kinfolk? Well, that is real. And so on two different levels, we've got people who run for office that run because they care about tenants' rights, that they care about criminal justice, about social services, but they're not really trained to deal with things like energy democracy, offshore wind. They don't know really the science and the math, the engineering of having to move a just transition, and they are uncomfortable, so they are in conventional, traditional silos. And so they run there. So there's that. And then there's also those people who, the moment that they become elected, they're there to cut the ribbon and no longer have accountability to their communities, like Eric Adams, Antonio Reynoso in New York, or who just voted to support luxury housing in Red Hook. These are our people who do these things to us. So I want to be clear. So the idea of co-governance is to understand that even your city council member has so much staff and they can only know so many issues. It's kind of like studying for the bar and needing to know 32 different subjects, right? And so co-governance, what that does, it makes them a partner with the community. The community becomes the brain trust. And so what we did with offshore wind was we brought in all of our elected officials, city, state, assembly, federal, and we provided them with a guideline and an analysis on if a lobbyist comes to you about these kinds of decisions, this is the analysis that you apply in order to make a decision about how to move legislation, how to support something, what, you know, it's because we're not lobbyists, and lobbyists have so many resources and they inundate them with information that sometimes seems like it's fact. And so we needed to provide them with training. And then while they're making decisions along the way, they can check in with us and bring us into the conversation. That expands their bandwidth, that expands their accountability and transparency to the community, and that expands their ability to have power over decisions that are necessary at this moment. And we called it co-governance. And out of all of our elected officials, I think we have 1.5 that is consistently doing that. Half because that one is like sometimes, right? But then we have one that is consistent, and it has really helped her be tremendously impactful in all of the things that are threats. So this idea of co-governance really is, how do you share power? And it's necessary at this moment where we're seeing climate disruption, because we don't know what governance is going to look like moving forward. That's because of climate. And we don't know what governance is going to be looking like because of the disruption that we're experiencing right now. So we need to create new systems. And this one is the one that we created, and it seems to be working for us.
Yeah, as far the question is, how can we fill the void, right? So I heavy on the co-governance, and I didn't know y'all. We practice co-governance, but if we stole that term from y'all, I apologize.
We didn't know, so that means
Okay.
that great stuff is happening independently.
Well, what I just want to steal. I don't want to steal ideas from Black folks, but so how can we fill the void? So did you all? I don't know. You think it was yesterday in the news? There was something about the legislature creating this like dashboard, right, where they showed how much money the state of Massachusetts was losing due to like federal budget cuts, right? I think it's something around like 3.7 billion and counting, right? And so I think that really provides. It's scary. And if you've done any like legislative advocacy on the Hill this year, you will notice the sort of glazed over look in your legislature. That's because they're not passing almost anything, right? Massachusetts was already the least active legislature in the country last session. It's probably going to be worse, and it's because they're terrified of this budget crater that they're going to have to fill. But that provides some opportunities, right? Police misconduct costs taxpayers millions of dollars every year in Massachusetts. When our belts have to tighten, right, and we don't have money for things like childhood education, when we don't have money for things like, you know, transportation and homes, how can we continue to justify paying millions of dollars because police can't act right, right? So there's an opportunity there as the budgets tighten to really fight for the things that matter, right? We always say budgets are moral documents. Well, we have to really get clear now because we don't have money to waste on BS, right? So that's an opportunity. This laboratories of democracy thing that it's on our question on our page. I think it comes from Justice Brandeis, and it was reiterated by Justice Brennan. This idea that in a federalist system, states are laboratories of democracy, right? We don't have a lot of laboratories left. Republicans are making full use of their laboratories. Folks on the right are making full use of their laboratories, and we are sitting here in Massachusetts with the least active legislature in the country. That's insane, right? And so I think, though, as we kind of acknowledge that the federal government, at least until next year, is lost to us, we are going to have to fight on the local level for things like again, tenants' rights, housing rights, environmental justice, economic opportunities for people, and at the state level. And also, going back to history, this is what the right did in 1968, right? After they lost with the Civil Rights Act, they went to electing people for school committees. They started doing co-governance by creating these think tanks to tell these politicians what to say and what talking points to use, right? And we have to do the same thing. The members the folks that we've elected, the ones that I'm proudest of, like Adam Gomez, like Sean Reed, like Nicole McLean, like Natasha Madry, those are our members, right? Those are our people. Before they were elected officials, they were neighbor-to-neighbor members. They were people who went through our political education courses. They were people who still come to our meetings, and we co-govern with them. And so that's what we have to kind of get back to. And so, yeah, I think that's how we fill the void left by the federal government, is by making more use of the power that we have on a state and local level, which we often ignore because federal power is just a lot more sexy, you know? So that's what I think.
Yeah, I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible, but 3 things. One, ACE anchors a pro bono technical assistance and legal assistance program, and our coordinator is actually here today. So if you, as a law student, want to sign up to support us, Denise is here. Denise, can you wave? So she can sign folks up. So that's one direct way that folks can help, because we are trying to manage the requests from folks, and it's not just the result of the federal government. It's the housing crisis that we've had in Massachusetts since I sat as a student in this room. The shelter crisis is not new. And, you know, our old housing stock and all of the ways in which that impacts quality of life. I think I can't emphasize enough the point that Miles made about how dysfunctional our legislature is, and that the last 2 legislative sessions, basically, we haven't had a break because they have not done their jobs and then patted themselves on the back when they do next to nothing at the very end of the session, and that some of the things that they do cause harm. Like the economic development bill that was finally passed last session has a provision in it to give tax breaks to data centers in Massachusetts, and there are regulations that are pending right now on that. So, and there's multiple data centers in Massachusetts, and there are no requirements on what source of energy they're using or how much water they use. There's one in Lowell that runs on backup diesel generation. It's in a residential neighborhood. We are co-counsel representing folks appealing that air permit. And so I guess it's a couple of things. One, I've lived in Massachusetts since I was 2. I'm sick and tired of us talking about how progressive we are when stuff on the ground is life and death for so many people. So I think it doesn't serve us on the left to just say, well, we're not the South, because we really need to get our stuff together. And then the other thing that I'll say is that, I guess on that, in terms of Massachusetts, we don't have an overarching equivalent to the civil rights protections on the federal level that exist, still exist, but are being rolled back daily. So there is a coalition of us that are trying to get a bill passed in Massachusetts to enable folks to go to state court when they've suffered discrimination on on the basis of civil rights. So supporting things like that, and then also not giving in to this narrative that like, well, the climate crisis is here, so we just need to electrify everything and build more housing, and that's going to solve the problem. Because just building more housing and just making more things electrified is going to mean we have Teslas and heat pumps for the wealthiest folks, and the rest of us are going to be out of luck. So I'm happy to talk more specifically about, you know, what I think the state can and should be doing. But those are just a couple of things.
Perfect. There is so much we could unpack here, but we'd love to bring in some of your voices to the conversation. Maybe we could use the other mic and bring people who would like to speak. We welcome.
Who has a question? You need a mic?
However, in the name of accessibility for everyone, just because I speak very loudly, it does not mean you hear very loudly. So I will use a mic. So a lot of what I heard today was about how we balance and engage and identify the needs of the day and actually serve the needs of the day. But in a range of conversations, but there were a couple of comments in that last round that talked about the long game. And so I'd like to know what you do. How do you do all the immediate stuff? And so just specifically, particularly when we're thinking about the juxtaposition of the nominal right and nominal left, right? The nominal right took 57 years for what some people are experiencing as rapid change, and some of us are like, right? But they had 57 years, one, because the things that they were trying to change were not urgent life and death matters. They were pet oppression projects. And the people who they were getting on their side, the things that they were trying to do, largely, at least in the discourse, weren't going to affect their lives. Now, there's a whole bunch of people whose lives are deeply affected, but like politically, they didn't necessarily appreciate that. On the nominal left, right, this whole conversation about the needs are immediate. When we talk about, I loved keeping the distinction between EJ and CJ, right? When we are working in communities, they're very frequently talking about the EJ question, right? What happens today? How do you, so that's long build up to ask this question. How do we keep an eye, how do we cultivate a culture of long game in a moment of short needs now? And not in the communities, but right, when we're going in and trying to be authentic and listen to what they need, when in the back of our mind is, well, it took the nominal right 57 years, and we might need to be in this. And some of us have been in it for a really long time to see. And just to be clear, right, the civil rights movement was a long game as well. And it felt like everything happened on day 2. But that was a long game project. And so we have woefully little information about how we cultivated a long game then. And so it will be interesting to hear your thoughts about long game now.
So we always have the 1,000-yard stare, and we're thinking about 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. So the plan to decarbonize our community, Sunset Park, is like that. What can we do in the short term? What can we do in the medium term, long term? What is the money that is needed to get this done? What do we need to fundraise to get to that next level? And so we lead with vision, and we lead with a vision that isn't just aspirational, but operational. And then we connect that to the complexity of what people are holding on the ground. And people on the ground are often told, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. All these plans get created, and they don't see it, and they lose trust. And so we need to be able, through the work that we do, demonstrate what is operational. So when they came to us after Superstorm Sandy and asked us that they wanted to do more than change the light bulb, that they wanted to do things that were impactful, that generated jobs, that cleaned the air, they came up with solutions, and we started to do those things. So we were able to double the amount of open space. We stopped the siting of a power plant. We literally just launched the first community-owned solar of its kind in New York City. Over 200 families have signed on to that, and it is a way of generating community wealth. We have mapped the entire neighborhood for renewable energy, for drinkable water, for food sovereignty. We are in community, so we are having conversations constantly and training people on the ground. So people are coming in and learning, if there's an extreme weather event and first responders don't show up, we're training them how to do CPR, how to stop the bleed. They're creating a community cuaderno comunitario, a community notebook, where they gather block per block. What are the assets? We have met with different churches, and they are participating on making sure that when there is extreme heat, that those are places they can go to. We've done tree pruning workshops, and people are getting certified because the mayor of New York defunded that program, and we are going to die from extreme heat. And so the community is not only trained, and that's a green job, but they're also replanting those. So there's action. There are things that are happening that they can wrap their head around. They're not just theory. They're not, theories about change. They're literally things that are happening that are literally changing the landscape. We expanded the median on 4th Avenue because the community said they were roadkill and couldn't get across the street. And so now it is 30% safer. So everything from building community, educating community, organizing, literally staffing the community, to creating plans that are short-term, medium-term, and long-term, we're doing all those things. But we're doing it from a lens of what's practical. So to have a long-term plan means that you also need to be able to be moving legislation to make sure that there's traction, that those things get funded, that those things happen. So that's why I say that we're not intersectional, that we're more multidimensional, because we have to work in all these different ways. Think Octavia Butler's parable of the sower, right? This is what we think about. So when we think about our community land trust, we're thinking the day may come where there will be a disruption of the supply chain, where we won't have access to water or renewable energy, where we will need to know how to defend each other. So we train people now for later on self-defense. We train them on de-escalation. And all that we're planting right now is about what we think is going to be happening in the next few years and beyond. And then we also share what a different economic system looks like. Because in this country is built on waste, on consumption, on being addicted to things. And when people come to this country, even from the global south, that's what they want. They want a house and the white picket fence. They want things because they didn't have them where they were coming from. And now we're saying to them, we're going to have to reclaim our ancestral traditions and live with what we want, with what we need instead of what we want, and start creating different economies of scale. So training them about how to create cooperatives, how to barter, how to create different economic systems that will make it possible for us not just to survive, but to thrive in the face of disruption. So those are the things, and it is 24/7. It is not easy. We work all the time. That's why I say that this is not a job, it's a calling. You do it I'm an elder now, right? And I was talking about that yesterday because I'm into it now, right? But people will say to me, because they're ageist, and they're only going to say that to a woman, they're not going to say that to a man. When are you going to stop doing this? Are you retiring soon? And I'm like, I will stop when the ancestors carry me to the stars. Because literally somebody did that for me to be here talking to you today. So yeah, we keep the 7th generation yet unborn in our heads as people of Black and Indigenous ancestry. And so the plan has a 1,000-yard stare, and we're thinking about it in terms of organizing, we're thinking about it in terms of base building, but also in terms of what kinds of policies can we move. And so we're looking very specifically on things like land use and zoning and things that are going to make it possible for us to, for example, in our neighborhood, declare a special purpose district so that the community plan is the plan for the entire neighborhood moving forward. I hope I answered.
You did. I'm going to add a tiny bit, but listen to what she said. That's the most important thing. No, there are just a couple of things like that I was thinking of as you were speaking, Elizabeth, about connecting the short and the long term, and then the trust, right? So, we talk about how do we, get into this work as lawyers? What skills do we? You're lawyers, right? You're going to be lawyers. All of you are going to pass the bar. I'm speaking that into existence for all of you, right? You have to learn how to make the argument. When we were talking about, we were fighting to get more things that actually applied to like working class people in the Affordable Homes Act a couple years ago. One of the things that we were trying to add were monies for decarbonization, right? If you go to Springfield and you talk to someone who's living in a building where their landlord's a slumlord, right? Their kids are going to like schools where they're literally crumbling, right? Their kid has asthma because they have mold in their apartments. You go to them and talk about decarbonization. They don't give a. Who cares? Who cares, right? But when we say, okay, well, so the first thing is you got to talk to those people, right? So that you don't come up with some theory that sounds great to a bunch of lawyers and means nothing to anyone else, right? But once you do that, you say, okay, well, decarbonization money can be used to clean up the mold in your apartment, right? That's giving your kid asthma, right? Those are, Adam Gomez, again, shout out to Adam Gomez, neighbor member, got $150 million in that bill, right? To do those decarbonization efforts and to prioritize public housing, low-income housing, public schools, right? So when we talk to them about decarbonization, we're saying these are the short-term benefits that you will get from this decarbonization, right? So you have to learn how to make the argument and make the connection, like Elizabeth said, between the long-term and the short-term. Other thing is that, you have to learn to move at the speed of trust, right? Sometimes, when you're a theoretician or a lawyer or whatever, you have that big picture in your mind. You're always thinking about that big picture, and you kind of skip over the short-term things, and that's why you don't get to the long-term things. FDR said that we'll save democracy when the average man and woman think that it's worth saving, right? So you have to make sure that they think that it's worth it, right, to engage in this. Fred Hampton said theory is cool, right, but theory without practice ain't shit. Right? You have to learn how to connect the short-term things to the long, and that's something that, as lawyers, you are uniquely positioned to do. So, do it.
Let me just first ask a question. We do need to end promptly at 12:55. Do other folks have questions that they want to pose? Okay. Let's just take one more question, and then I'll give you each a second to... Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. Hello, I am Dalton Grace Wiggins. Thank you guys so much for coming here today. I have a question for Elizabeth, but maybe the other two representatives can join in with their opinions. So something that really stood out to me whenever you were talking about your background was that your organization does a lot of efforts in red states. And as somebody from South Carolina, that fascinates me. So how would you identify the threats to your cause in those red states? And how does your organization go about addressing them?
So my organization does it. It's a local organization in Brooklyn. My organization does it. It's a local organization in Brooklyn, and the organization that does Climate Justice Alliance. And what they do is they reach out to the members in those states, and those states basically raise what their priorities are, and then they work on creating translocal solutions, so they become regional, right? And then remember that it's not just red states; it's also the different needs in West Virginia are different than they are like if you're in Gucci country, like literally, like topography kind of defines what you're able to do in terms of organizing and base building and how you move an agenda. And so they do that. Let's say Climate Justice Alliance does that. And I will tell you that some of the strategies that they're using, we won't share.
We're going to give everybody just another minute to just offer a concluding remark, and then we will wrap up. Thank you.
Oh boy. So, a couple of things. One, I think, to Elizabeth's point, like the solutions are in community, and they're gonna look different. Even like what works in Roxbury is gonna look different from what works in Springfield, and like the underlying root causes of things are the same. It's systemic racism and capitalism, but how we respond to that is going to look different. So I think keeping that in mind as folks are thinking about strategizing is really important. I also, just two really quick things. In terms of the left versus the right, I think can't emphasize enough the point of like talking about things in words that people actually understand. Talk to people about asthma and they'll be like, yes, everybody I know has asthma. And then you can talk about the why. And then we build solutions like what Miles referenced. Adam Gomez is also one of the sponsors of a bill that builds on the provisions in some of what's in the decarbonization work that Miles mentioned to actually hold landlords accountable for remediating the mold and dealing with that, because we don't have anything that lawyers can actually do about it. I think there's a whole lot more I could say, but I'm going to stop there.
I've thrown a lot of quotes at you. I'll throw two more at you. Close. So first, I'll give you one from Florence Gresham, who's my grandmother, who's an ancestor now. She was the person who I probably learned the most about community organizing from. And she always told me to brighten the corner where you are, right? And to kind of focus on, the immediate, focus on your people, and don't get too distracted by the long term or the 10-year. Just because if you focus on the corner, then you can focus on the block, right? Then you can focus on the street, then you can focus on the neighborhood. The second is Winston Churchill, who was kind of a jerk. He was a racist and he was a colonizer, but he was also an anti-fascist when it counted, right? And so when it counted. So when he gets elected, right, he gives this famous speech to Parliament, and France is being invaded, and Britain's about to be invaded by the Nazis, and the sky is falling, right? And he gives a famous speech about, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. You may have heard that. And people try to, they focus on that when they talk about that speech. But at the end of that speech, he says, I take up my task with buoyancy and hope, right? And that's the thing I would leave you with is do not forget your buoyancy, do not forget your hope, do not forget to, be with your people, to remember why you are doing this good work that you want to be engaged in. Because otherwise you just become a talking head full of theories and you fail and you'll get burned out and nobody wins. So remember the buoyancy and the hope.
I think that's it, Mike.
All right. Well then, please join me in thanking